This is my original Game Boy Advance SP that I've had since childhood. If yours looks anything like mine, then it was thoroughly loved, but time has not been kind to it. I've had a lingering interest reshelling mine for a while now, but hesitated because console modding seems to be outside of my skill set. If that sounds anything like you, I have some great news. It's not. If a chucklehead like me can do it, so can you.
Stupid son of a bitch. Fuck.
It sucks.
Fuck. Ah, just rip me off a little piece. Shit.
I don't know what to do. Why am I suffering? I can't do this. It's supposed to be easy. All right, so, fuck, we're just gonna move on to the next step, all right? Okay, for insurance purposes, we're gonna try this one more time. My first mistake was using the stock screwdrivers that came included with my Game Boy shell. My advice is don't use those. I highly recommend using a screwdriver from Fix-It. These can be very expensive and hard to justify if this is gonna be your one and only mod. But if this is something that interests you, I highly recommend it. You don't necessarily have to buy this. I checked my local library and it just so happened that they were renting out this kit that included tons of screws, tons of tweezers, everything that could make this job as easy as possible. I've already gone ahead and deconstructed this Game Boy Advance twice already off camera and done all of the mistakes so you don't have to. So let's get started. Our first step is to unscrew 5 of these screws with our tri-tip screwdriver. The final screw that's holding in the battery is going to be a Phillips head screw. Now's a good time to gently remove the battery and to see if it's bloated. Our final screw that's holding in our backing in place is going to be a Y-tip screwdriver. And with that final screw removed, the backing should come off with no hesitation, revealing the motherboard. In order to remove the motherboard, you're going to want to get rid of these 3 screws that are holding it into place with your Phillips head screwdriver. Before we separate the motherboard from the system itself, we're going to gently lift the motherboard and be careful because it is connected with a ribbon that connects our screen. We're going to bring it over here, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to grab a pair of tweezers and you're going to gently remove these rubber and plastic parts that make up our controls. You want to be careful with this next step because now we're going to remove the motherboard from the LCD ribbon cable. Essentially, there's going to be 2 plastic bits on each side of the cable. They are gray, and what you want to do is you want to gently push up on them, and that should release our cable. Like that. We're going to set aside our motherboard for now. Hidden behind the ribbon cable, there's a final Phillips head screw that we must undo. Undoing that one screw is going to undo this little piece that connects our 2 hinges. Our next step is to remove the hinges on each side of the Game Boy. This tends to be the most difficult part, but I think I've done it enough times to know how to do it properly. You're going to want to close your Game Boy for this next step because what we're going to be doing is we're going to use the flat part of our tweezers or the screwdrivers themselves, and we're going to be pushing down on this little hinge. Applying minimal pressure reveals that this is very easy to pop out. The next step is to open up your Game Boy to the point where it will just stop, and using your screwdriver or some other pointy device, you are just going to push it out. The right side of your Game Boy is always going to be colored white. The left side is going to be black. I've already slid my new aftermarket shoulder pads here, but essentially there's only one way to push this in. You'll see it once you examine it up close that there's an indent on this side that does not exist anywhere else. Now we're going to remove the left side, and essentially what you want to do is you kind of want to shimmy it out of there and it should come out with 0 effort. Be careful with the ribbon. We're going to set this aside and we're going to repeat the process. Using our tweezers, we're going to gently apply a little bit of pressure and it should pop out. It's worth mentioning that this little plastic piece that alerts you on the battery level was not included in my Temu package. So if that's the case with you, you could easily just put your old one into the new. We're done with this bottom half for now, so put it aside. Our next step is taking a pair of tweezers and removing the rubber bits that are concealing these screws. Now with all of that removed, you should be able to access the screen with minimal effort. Before we lay our new LCD screen to rest, you're going to want to take your ribbon cable on your new screen and you're going to want to turn it and loop it around just like this and place it on top. Now that we've placed our LCD screen, we're going to do everything in reverse. I highly recommend placing your fragile handle with care film screen protector on because we're still going to be playing with a lot of screws, and the last thing you want to do is drop one on the LCD screen. As you're screwing things back into its place, I want you to remember to always hand tight your screws. Do not overdo it because that can damage the insides of the plastic. Alright, in order to connect these two pieces, you're going to want to feed your ribbon cable sideways down this little slit. Alright, now we're going to install the hinges. This tends to be the most difficult part, just like I said, so please pay close attention. I think I've gone through this plenty of times to explain it. You're going to want to start with your Game Boy closed. And just remember that the right hinge is going to be on the right side and the black on the left. This next part is very hard to show on camera, but essentially what you're going to do is you'll notice that on these hinges, there are little ridges that let you know where to slide it in. And what I mean is if you take a look inside of here, there are two slits on each opposite side. And what you want to do is line it up best you can, and it should slide in just like that. And our next step is it slid in the first little bit here, but now what we want to do is we want to slide it in for the second bit. As you see, they're separated by a vertical line. As you're trying to slide it in, you're going to want to look inside of here because the ridges that are on the inside of this are in a different position here. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to open it to a degree that the original Game Boy naturally just opens in, and you're going to just push it all the way in. Try not to force it in because if it's lined up perfectly, it should slide in no hassle. We're going to do the same thing starting with closing our system, and you're going to slide it in halfway. The second side is always going to be the easiest one because it's already lined up. Once you open it, it's just going to snap into place. Before we start closing things up, I want you to remember about this little bit and its hidden screw. Now we're going to connect our ribbon cable with its connector here, and this part is very easy as long as you are patient. First start by lifting up these gray hinges just ever so slightly, just so they're both open just like that. Start by extending the ribbon cable as much as you can without too much pressure, and essentially what you're going to do is you're going to slide it in there and you're going to pull the plastic down to secure it. You want to insert the pins so they disappear inside of the plastic and then bring each hinge down. Now that the ribbon has been connected successfully, we're going to place all of the buttons back to its place. With everything back in its place, we're just going to close it very gently. Working backwards here, we're going to screw our Phillips head screwdrivers on each of these 3 ports. We're going to finish this up by screwing the tri-wing screws into place. Just remember that the longest screws are going to be at the 4 corners and the smaller screws are going to be in the 2 middles. And we're going to close up our battery compartment with our Phillips head screwdriver. Our last step technically would be replacing these rubber bits on each of these screws. I would recommend using glue, not Gorilla Glue. Don't be fucking stupid like I was. Included in the package are these 2 thin wires that are meant for soldering to connect to the brightness button on your Game Boy. However, I don't know how to fucking solder. This is supposed to be an easy guide, so it's optional, you don't have to. And there you have it. Now we have a complete reshelled Game Boy Advance SP. So now let's test it with Pinball of the Dead. Because we didn't do the soldering, this button is not operational. So if you want to higher the brightness or lower it, it's going to be a touch screen. It's going to be on the right side. And if you want to change the color profile, that is going to be on the left. We're going to hold it down and it should cycle through its many colors. And what I love about this project above all else is that the original hardware is still my original Game Boy. I've given it a new life and I can't wait to play it. Let me know what shells you end up getting and whether or not this tutorial helped you or not. Bye.